welcome to the TNF podcast. Like, comment, share, subscribe, click on that bell for notifications. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Music, give us a follow, give us a rating. That would be excellent. All right. Got some upcoming shows for everyone. On the 11th of June at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. That's a Wednesday, so be aware of that. We got Vrajikishore Das, also known as Vic Daikara from the bands 108, Beyond, Inside Out, and Shelter. That should be a good one. On the 22nd, we're taking a break for the holiday on the 15th. On the 22nd of June at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, we've got Ashley Pineapple Hand Grenade. She's a merch slinger for the band Killing Time. She's really funny too, so that should be an interesting show. On the 29th of June at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, we've got Timmy Leonard from the band Invocation of Nehek. Like I said, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And then on the 13th, we're also taking a break for the 4th of July weekend. On the 13th of July at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, we've got Scott Krause from Earth Crisis Sect and Path of Resistance. And I have an official merchandising company, Hell's Heart Merch Co. Go on over to hellsheartco.bigcartel.com. Use the code 20 for 20% off your entire order. They're fine Bella Canvas Next Level Tri-Blend t-shirts. They are 50% polyester, 25% cotton, 25% rayon. They feel amazing. I think you'll really like them if you like hardcore themed, movie themed t-shirts. You'll really be into them. So check it out. Use the code 20, 20% off. All right. So my next guest today, really talented drummer. Been following his bands for quite some time. I am really stoked to be able to see them. They're going to be playing with Judge and Integrity in Los Angeles, but this has been probably one of the most influential hardcore bands in history, I would say. And they were really influential in bringing straight edge and veganism to the music scene, and I would also say the world. I think a lot of people were influenced by into veganism because of these guys, but plays for the bands Earth Crisis, FREYA, and CINDERBLOCK. Ladies and gentlemen, Dennis Merrick. Thank you so much for being here, Dennis.
Of course, of course. Good to see everybody.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, my question for you, typically what I ask people that come on this show is, what was growing up for you like as a kid? You're from upstate New York. My family's actually from Syracuse. So, what was it like
Yeah.
growing up in the abysmal cold of upstate New York?
I mean, it was just second nature, really. In my early days, of course, I didn't really think much of it. It was just it's how things were. I enjoyed having 4 seasons, going through winter. Enjoyed winter stuff. Skiing and sledding and all that stuff as a kid, and snowboarding now. And in the summer, going to the lake. I live in near Buffalo, so Lake Erie's right there. So going to the lake in the summer, and the ski hills and stuff during the winter. So it was I had a good place to grow up. It was awesome here.
And you, as a kid growing up, what was your first exposure to music? Did you have music playing in your household? Did you have family members that play music? What was sort of your earliest memories of that? And like, what was your first non-metal and non-hardcore concert?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I'm one of 4 kids, and all the kids in my family. I have 2 brothers and a sister, and everyone played an instrument growing up. But my parents were not musically inclined or artistically inclined at all. Like, that just was not their thing. So to be honest, I don't really remember even listening to a lot of music as a kid, like at least from my parents. But definitely got into just like typical rock and roll type stuff in the early 80s, as a young kid. Um, you know, Journey and like, Men at Work and like bands like that. Um, but my brother's a bass player, and actually plays a bunch of different instruments. He's still an active musician. He lives on the Eastern Shore of Maryland and plays in a few bands down there, not punk or hardcore, like rock and roll type stuff. My younger brother was a drummer growing up, and my sister played keyboard. But neither of them really play too much anymore. Um, but it was fun as a kid. I'll never forget. We actually had one of my like this well-loved uncle of our family passed away, our Uncle Larry, and I have no idea what year it was, sometime during the 80s. And we had the gathering at my folks' house after the funeral. And I got on the drums, my older brother got on the guitar, and my sister on the keyboards, and we were just playing in the basement, like goofing around. And we ended up like playing for probably an hour. And all the people that were there were like, listening to like the Merrick band. It was kind of funny. It wasn't an official thing. It was just fun. But my first concert, believe it or not, like non-hardcore concert, I cannot remember what year it was, but I was probably in junior high school or something, was the Monkees. So that was my first like concert that I ever went to.
Whoa.
Yeah.
What was that like?
I mean, I don't remember much about it. I just remember I think they had a TV show, I think, when I was a kid. So I think I used to watch their TV show, and I think that's why I wanted to go to the concert. I don't really remember, to be honest. Um, our parents didn't go, so I think my older brother or sister probably went and took me. But that was I don't remember much about it, except it was it was called the Odd, the big venue in Buffalo. It was there, but I don't remember a ton about it, to be honest. I remember sitting really far away. That's about all I remember.
I just remember that the Monkees were kind of like the Beach Boys in that there was the original lineup for so many years, and then it was just Davy Jones and some hired guns. So I was curious as to whether or not it was actually a good experience or not. But you don't remember. I think I
Uh,
went to some
I
concerts when I
mean,
was younger, and I didn't really remember them.
yeah, I remember it definitely was like the original guys, I think, when I saw them. I'm sure later, he had the hired guns going on, but I think when I saw them, it was the original guys. I remember enjoying it, like having a great time. It was my first rock concert, but I mean, I couldn't name a song or anything anymore. Like, I don't remember much about it.
Hey, hey, with the Monkees. Probably yeah,
Yeah,
right.
like I remember that. Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I remember their
um,
logo. That's about it.
How did you seg into hardcore and punk rock from there? What was your first exposure to that? Did you have a friend or somebody you went to school with that kind of introduced you to that? How did that work?
Yeah, I think like a lot of people, I can't remember who I was listening to recently, but I felt like it was a podcast of somebody, and it like his answer to that question was just like mine. I think a lot of other people do from that era. I got into it through skateboarding. I started skateboarding, when I was probably 12. So that was probably that would have been 85, I guess. And there was an older guy down the street, 2 or 3 years older than me, that skated and kind of took me under his wing a little bit and like taught me some stuff. And also, I subscribed to Thrasher magazine, so Thrasher would interview these bands, like punk bands back then, and he would like dub tapes for me. So I remember he dubbed me like a Black Flag live record, a couple Dead Kennedys records. Trying to think what else. Dead Milkmen, JFA, a bunch of those kind of bands. So that was like my first introduction to punk, and and then it just kind of grew from there. Like then I had friends that a couple of years later, maybe 2 years after that, probably 86, 87, that were listening to kind of the early hardcore stuff. Minor Threat, Uniform Choice, stuff like that. I think Uniform Choice was around probably in 86 or 87, I think. So that was just that hardcore was friends through skateboarding, but yeah, the punk stuff really came from that older kid that lived down the street.
What was your first show? Do you remember the first live event that you ever attended?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. So it was supposed to be the venue back then in Buffalo was called the River Rock Cafe, and it was supposed to be Youth of Today and I think Uniform Choice actually together, and a couple of kids I went to high school with, um, Daryl Taberski from Snapcase, Tim Redmond from Snapcase. We all went to St. Francis High School, like a Catholic school in Buffalo. This other guy, Dave, his brother Rob. So we were all supposed to be going, and there was an older guy, this guy Bob Tamaka, who was 2 or 3 years older than me, and he had a car, so he was supposed to be my ride. And but it was snowing a little bit, and he got freaked out by the snow, so he didn't go. So I missed the show. So of course I heard all about it the next day in school, and everybody was talking about how amazing it was. So that was supposed to be my first show, but then probably 2 or 3 weeks later, 7 Seconds came through. So my first show was 7 Seconds. I can't remember what record it would have been off of. I mean, it was probably, I was probably 15, so that would have been like 88. So whatever song or whatever record they had at that point, The Crew maybe. But yeah, that was my first show, and it was like life changing, of course, like everybody's first hardcore show. It was packed. I mean, I remember the place feeling like it was a bigger place at the time, but um, it wasn't. I mean, I imagine it was probably like a 300 cap room, but it was packed, and it was just people moshing and stage diving, and I was sold like from the first minute I was in there. It was awesome.
Mm. I remember my first show ever. There was kind of a sense of trepidation because I didn't really know what to expect. Anything that I heard that was hardcore punk rock was from a record, and I wouldn't say I got involved in it directly from skateboarding. That was just kind of something that came along with it. But Carl had mentioned when he was on the show that he definitely got into it from skateboarding too. Were you kind of
Mhm.
scared or intimidated when you were walking into the venue? Were you like, I don't know what to expect? What's going to happen? Is this going to be crazy?
Yeah, I mean a little bit, because definitely as a 15-year-old, I think I was 15. As a 15-year-old, I mean, there's all these people that seemed a lot older and bigger than I was, and definitely like, I grew up in the suburbs, right? So I grew up in Hamburg, it was a quiet little town, and all my friends that I skated with, we all got into punk and hardcore, and we basically were all at that show. And I think for a lot of us, that was our first show. And I mean, I guess the fact that I had all my friends there was cool, but I think I was definitely nervous, seeing like punk rockers with crazy hair and leather jackets and spiked belts and all this craziness, But definitely like I definitely remember immediately like my friends and I all like getting right into the pit, like I think at my first show I probably did my first stage dive, I think. I don't remember being like too nervous to do that, but I definitely had a little bit of trepidation.
Now, where did the straight edge vegan thing come in? Why did you feel kind of drawn to those lifestyles? Was that from listening to the music, or again, did you have friends, or was that kind of when you went into Earth Crisis? Was that something that you were exposed to through playing with the band?
I was straight edge and vegetarian before I joined Earth Crisis, but I was straight edge first. So by the time I went to that first 7 second show, I was already straight edge. And that was definitely through friends, right? Like, we heard, Minor Threat and Uniform Choice. Those are the first like straight edge bands I remember hearing. And like I felt I really identified with the lyrics, right? So I just remember I don't know what it was, but I remember being in high school and seeing other dudes my age, and their thing was, going to parties, drinking, getting in fights, taking advantage of girls. Like it just wasn't. I knew at an early age, and I don't really know why, but I just felt like at an early age that wasn't for me. I did get an early start like drinking. I drank actually before high school, like that. I got started like seventh and eighth grade probably was the first time I drank. But by the time I was actually in high school, at least freshman year or halfway through it, I just realized it wasn't for me. Like I didn't want to be like those dudes that I saw around me. And then just like the lyrics to like Minor Threat songs and Uniform Choice songs inspired me, and I identified with them. I'm like, you know what, that's what I want to do. And shortly after that, I identified as straight edge and started going to all these shows. Vegetarianism was later. That actually wasn't until probably what would have been 91 maybe that I became vegetarian. I tried a couple times throughout high school, but it wasn't until I like moved out of my parents' house and wasn't like kind of hammered by them a little bit that I could actually do it. Tim actually from Snapcase, you know, he wasn't in Snapcase back then. I think I joined Earth Crisis before he joined Snapcase, but he he had been vegetarian since like his freshman year of high school or something. Like he started very very early, and he would always talk to me about it, and that got me thinking about it. And then of course bands like Youth of Today came along and promoted it through their music. But I'll never forget Tim and a friend of mine, Paige, from back then. They were both vegetarian, both straight edge. It was kind of like the three of us that hung out together. But they came over to my parents' house, and my parents were like eating dinner late and eating like burgers or steaks or something. And I remember Tim and Paige both saying to my parents, like, why don't you just take a bite of Dennis's arm or something if you're eating that? You know, like they're giving my parents a hard time. And I was like so clueless initially. Like I remember we ordered a pizza and I got pepperoni on it. And I told them, just like take the pepperoni off. What's the big deal? Like I didn't get it. But then it was finally, yeah, probably 91 or so when I went away to school, I became vegetarian. And then very shortly after that, and actually this, I remember who that podcast was that I was trying to think of earlier that talked about getting into punk and hardcore through skating. It was Joel Capolongo that owned Strong Hearts. Um, he said the same thing. I think he became vegetarian first, and then read John Robbins' book Diet for a New America, which I think a lot of us did in the early '90s. And that made me realize, like, if I'm vegetarian for ethical reasons, I need to be vegan as well. So it took me probably another year or so to become vegan, and I became vegan literally like pretty much right before I joined Earth Crisis.
When you had before you had joined Earth Crisis, did you play in any sort of proto bands like high school bands or anything that would kind of lead you into playing with those guys?
Yeah, I mean, my first band that I played with was a cover band with my brother. Like, I grew up playing violin. Actually, that was my first instrument. And you know, I got like as far as all county and all that kind of stuff. Played for I don't know 6, 7 years. But my brother playing bass, he'd always been in rock bands growing up, and basically I started because his drummer one night didn't show up for practice, and their practice space was our basement at my parents' house. So my brother was like, "Hey, come downstairs, try to play a beat just so we can practice these songs." I had no idea what I was doing, but it came very naturally. Like I just sat behind the drum kit and started playing a beat, and I was like, "This is cool. Like this is what I want to do. I want to play drums." I kept playing violin for a little bit, but quit pretty shortly after. And so I started playing. My first band was like a cover band with my brother, just like a rock cover band. Even though I was into like punk and stuff, you know, that was just who I played with. But shortly after that, the guy that was actually supposed to drive me to that first Youth of Today show that I was supposed to go to, he was a guitar player. And he and I started a band called United. It was like a punk band. And this is during the 80s. He and I and a few other dudes we never played like a real show. We played at like a battle of the bands at a high school. We played like a couple like garage shows and stuff like that. And then a couple of years later in high school, I joined a band called No Joke, which was myself and this guy Justin, his cousin Greg played guitar, and we actually played a few shows. Like we played the River Rock in Buffalo, we played the Sky Room, we played a show in Syracuse, and actually it's funny. I don't know if you know Larry Ransom. Do you know him?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know him, but I know the name. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, old Buffalo hardcore guy, works for Rev now, lives on the West Coast. He like posts all these old flyers from all these old shows in Buffalo, and seeing all these old flyers, I was like, wow, No Joke actually played a lot of shows. There's like shows of playing with Zero Tolerance. We never played with Judge, but there was probably like 3 or 4 flyers with us playing with Judge, but they were like notorious back then for booking shows and not playing. So we never played with them, but we played with Sick of It All. Trying to remember who else we played with, but we played some pretty good shows back then. But that was my first real hardcore band. And then I started playing for CINDERBLOCK. CINDERBLOCK also played Syracuse, and No Joke had played Syracuse, and the Earth Crisis guys had seen me play for both of those bands, knew I was straight edge, knew I was vegetarian, and their drummer quit in '93, and they approached me to see if I would play for them. So that's how that all happened.
That's funny you said Judge canceling shows because, like I had mentioned at the top of the hour, you guys are playing with Judge and Integrity. And don't cancel,
Yeah.
Purcell. I know you watch the show sometimes. Don't cancel. I'm
Yeah, right.
flying out there and everything. Who would you say are some drummers that really kind of influenced your playing back then and then now even?
I think back then, like when I first started playing drums, initially I was self-taught, started taking drum lessons after a little bit, and my drum teacher would give me drum videos for some different drummers to like watch and like learn some stuff. And I remember like one of the first drummers that I watched and really dug how he played was I don't Kenny Arnoff, who I don't know if you know. He played for John Cougar. He was the drummer for John Cougar, and he just
Oh
had this
yeah.
like very like simple, solid, really like groove feel to how he played. So I really dug that. So that influenced me just as like a drummer in general. There's a drummer, Dennis Chambers, who I liked a lot, who played for like some like funk bands and stuff back then, Parliament Funkadelic and some other bands. I liked him a lot. Um, and and I liked him too because the first kind of music I ever got into was hip hop before I got into punk. So, and hip hop used to sample all that stuff. So like Dennis Chambers drumming definitely inspired me. And then I think heavier music, like definitely Sammy and Mackie were definitely two influences early on because I loved like the Judge record and I loved Age of Quarrel. I loved what Mackie played on that Bad Brains record that he played on, Quickness. So like I think those were hardcore wise were my influences as far as hardcore music goes.
Quickness is the drumming on that is really solid. That's definitely my favorite
Oh,
Bad Brains record, and it sounds amazing, you know?
yeah, the drumming on that record is just incredible. Yeah, yeah, and I
Yeah.
just I like drummers. Like I don't know a lot of like I'm not like a Neil Peart guy or like I mean he's good whatever, but I never loved his drumming. The kind of drumming I am into is like if I can tell the drummer has like plays with emotion and feel, like that's what I care about. So like I love William Goldsmith from Sunny Day Real Estate. Like I love how he plays. I love how Dave Grohl plays. Like he just hits hard as hell. And then of course, yeah, Mackie and Sammy. So yeah, those are some of the drummers I've been inspired by for sure.
I like that you said that somebody that plays with feeling. I think it was Steve Vai or one of those other guitar virtuosos that said Kurt Cobain is a good guitar player. And Kurt Cobain is not a technical guitar player, but Steve
Right.
Vai's justification for it was he played with heart and he played with emotion and he played with
Mm.
feeling, like you said. And I think that's something that definitely attracts me to certain bands and certain musical styles is that I'm not a big tech guy either. I'm not like crazy into, showing off or technicality or anything like that. I love stuff that's very straightforward. And I've almost said that I like stuff that I know I could probably learn to play because some of that other stuff is
Right.
like way intimidating. And I'm just like, whoa, and kind of hard for me to assimilate. So I think that's a great way of putting it for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why, like, like a band like Rush, like, I understand that they're talented musicians, but to me, like, their music just didn't have like a soul to it. Like, I'm sure it did, but to me, I didn't feel it. But that's what makes me like music as well. And I like it depending on my mood. I like all sorts of different kinds of music, but that's what draws me to musicians and bands is if it sounds like they mean it, that's what makes me like it.
Yeah. And you mentioned hip hop. Did upstate New York have any sort of hip hop scene? I know probably at the time it was more relegated to like the bigger cities like New York and LA, but were there any sort of upcoming artists that came from that area?
Not back then. At least, and maybe I missed it, but not that I knew of, anyways. So there was no, the hip hop scene was just touring bands that would come through and people would go out to see them. But as far as like an actual Buffalo hip hop band coming up at that time, there wasn't really anybody. But now, like,
Mm.
obviously, I don't know if you know Griselda, like their stuff. Have you heard? Do you know them?
No, I don't actually.
Oh, yeah, Griselda has like they're huge. Like, I don't know if I'd say they're huge, but they put Buffalo hip hop on the map. Like all these other artists talk about Griselda. It's like three dudes from Buffalo, and that's like some serious Buffalo hip hop, and it's definitely given Buffalo like a name for hip hop now. But that's really, at least from what I know, like that's the first band that really did something with hip hop from Buffalo.
What would you say are your influences as far as early on hip hop is concerned?
And that was like through kind of, well, actually, my first exposure to hip hop was through before I skateboarded, I got into breakdancing. So that was probably, when I was in like fourth or fifth grade or something. So back then it was like Grandmaster Grandmaster Flash and Run DMC and the Fat Boys and stuff like that. But then there wasn't a lot of people around me that listened to that stuff. So I didn't really have anybody to gain knowledge of it from. It was just really like through my interest in like breakdancing and getting into rap music from that. But then some of the same kids that I skated with that we listened to punk, um, we also got into like early hip hop. So like Boogie Down Productions was like one of my favorite groups back then. KRS One was just smart and like awesome. All the native tongue stuff like Jungle Brothers and Tribe Called Quest, and I loved all that stuff. And then Public Enemy, I love Public Enemy for their like political message, and just it was hard as hell, so I really dug that too. So that was kind of like my early hip hop influence, was all that kind of stuff. Eric B and Rakim. Rakim's still one of my favorite artists. As far as like MCs, he was one of my early on favorites.
Nice. Excellent. Well, since we're on the subject of hip hop, it is about halfway through the show, and we always do a little trivia game. And the subject is 80s and 90s hip hop. So, everybody, get ready. Here
Let's
we
see.
go.
Let's see.
Okay. 10 questions, multiple choice. They're all in ascending difficulty. Most of these,
All right.
not a huge hip hop fan. I'm pretty into it, but there's some deep cuts where I just wouldn't know any of the knowledge. But I think you'll be
All
all
right.
right with this.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay. All right. Here we go. 80s and 90s hip hop. Question number 1. Who is known as the godfather of hip hop? Is it A, Grandmaster Flash, B, DJ Kool Herc, C, Africa Bombata, or D, Curtis Blow?
Cool Herc, I would say.
You got it. It was B.
That's an easy
Perfect.
one.
All
Yeah.
right. Yeah, well, like I said, it's ascending difficulty, so they'll get harder. So
All right. Yeah,
here
we'll
we
see how
go.
I do. I'll start getting them wrong.
Let's see here. You'll definitely get this one. Number 2. Which group released the hit song Fight the Power in 1989? Do I even need to read the multiple choice?
No, Public Enemy. Yeah.
There you go. Public Enemy. The other choices were Beastie Boys, NWA, and Run DMC. But let's
Nice.
see here. Number 3. What was the name of the first major label rap album released by Nas in 1994? Was it A, Stillmatic,
Still, oh,
B, the Go ahead. Extra points.
wait, no, go through it. Go through it.
Oh, A, Stillmatic, B, The Blueprint, C, Illmatic, or D, Ready to Die?
Yeah, Illmatic.
Of course.
Yeah.
Legendary album. I love that album.
Yeah,
It's
that record's great.
fantastic. New York State of Mind, man. That's my jam.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Number 4. God, some of these I don't even feel like you need the multiple choice. In fact, I'm going to ask you the question, and if you feel like you need the multiple choice, I'll read the multiple choice.
All right.
All right. Number 4. Which West Coast rapper released The Chronic in 1992?
Oh, Snoop Dogg. Or no, was that Snoop Dogg or Dre? I forget. I didn't love all that early West Coast stuff, really.
Okay, Dr. Dre. Yeah, it was Dr. Dre. But
Dre. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny because I don't think I was that into it either. I definitely kind of appreciated more the East Coast sound. It was, somebody
Me
described it
too.
to me growing up. They were like, East Coast is very like aggressive, and one of my buddies that I went to high school with, he's like West Coast is all about love, man. It's all about love, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I never, I never really got into it for that reason because I never
Yeah.
got into like love ballads. Like when I was listening to like music growing up, like all those like hair metal bands, they would always sing about stuff that I just
Yeah.
really didn't care about, and that's kind of what drew me to punk and hardcore because it was had like an ideological message. So, but yeah, it
Yeah.
was Dr. Dre.
100%.
All right, here number 5. What female rapper released "All Hail the Queen" in 1989? Was it A,
Queen
MC
Latifah.
Light? Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Nailed it. Nailed it. Let's
I
see here.
saw Queen Latifah. I saw Queen Latifah in like the '90s, and there was like a stampede. I almost got like run over at her show.
Really?
Hmm. Hmm.
Whoa.
Yeah, in Syracuse. It was in Syracuse.
Oh, okay. They were like rushing the stage
Yeah.
or something?
Now it was like
Dude.
someone up at the front of the stage. Someone thought someone pulled a gun or something, so everybody ran back towards the exit.
Oh,
And it turned out to be bullshit, but everyone ran back towards the exits, and people were like falling over each other. It was crazy.
holy shit.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Okay. Number 6. Which rap duo had a breakout hit with Paid in Full in 1987? Was it A, Mobb Deep?
Eric B and Rakim.
I was going to say, you're going to know this.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got it. You got it. You got it.
Yeah.
See, these aren't too bad at all.
No.
All right. Number 7. Okay. How about Southern rap and Southern hip hop? Would you have been able to answer any questions like that?
I actually appreciate them more now, but throw it at me. Let's see.
No, I was just gonna say because a lot of this is like older stuff, but like some of my early exposure to rap and hip hop was just by osmosis because that's what everybody was listening to at the time. I didn't necessarily go and seek it out because I definitely liked, Wu Tang and Gravediggers and stuff like that. But
Mm.
the Cash Money Millionaires and like No Limit Records, that was like huge when I was in high school. But I was just curious as to whether or not like if there would have been any questions if you would have been able to know them. But
Yeah,
let's see
maybe.
here. What is number 7? What is the real name of the Notorious B.I.G.? Is it A, Calvin Broadus, B, Christopher Wallace, C, Sean Carter, or D, Andre Young?
Oh shit. Maybe C. I don't know.
No, it was B, Christopher Wallace. Sean Carter is
All right.
Jay-Z, I think. Yeah.
All right.
Uh, let's see here. All right. Number 8. Which 1999 album by A Tribe Called Quest is widely regarded as a classic? Do I even need to read them?
If they're all Tribe Called Quest records, I might screw up which one was 99, but I love the records. So.
Oh, it was 91. 91.
Oh,
So it's
91. I think
A.
it's 99.
Yeah. Yeah. It's A, Low End Theory, B, People's Instinctive Travels, C, Beats, Rhymes, and Life, or D, Midnight Marauders.
I think that 91 probably would have been Low End Theory.
Yes, sir. Low End Theory.
Yeah.
There was a band called Low End Theory for a while. Do you remember that band?
Nah.
I think they were from New Jersey or something. They did a
Hardcore
split
band?
with they did a split with X Number 5, which was the Shades Apart singer, did a project after Shades Apart, and yeah, I don't think they lasted very long, but let's see here. Number 9. Who produced much of Wu-Tang Clan's debut album Enter the Wu-Tang 36 Chambers? Was it A, DJ Premier, B, Pete Rock, C, RZA, or D, Large Professor?
I thought RZA produced all of it, but maybe I'm
And
wrong.
you are correct. You are correct.
All right. I didn't think they had
Nailed it.
anybody else.
Well, some of their later albums they had mathematics. Like I think he did
Yeah.
the Once Upon a Time in Shaolin, the one album that
All
they
right.
only recorded one copy of. I think he did some other stuff after
Yeah.
that, but yep, it was RZA. Okay, and I think you'll know this one too. Which rapper famously battled KRS-One in the Bridge Wars? Was it A, LL Cool J, B, Rakim, C, MC Shan, or D, Cool Mo D?
Maybe MC Shan.
It is
I don't
MC
know.
Shan. You got it. You got it,
Huh.
sir.
Good.
Freaking awesome.
Yeah.
That's 10 questions, and you were killing it, sir. But you know what you get as a result of that?
You get nothing.
Perfect.
That's what you get. I don't have anything to give you, but like I had mentioned before, I always like to get my guests shirts. Anyone that comes on the show, it'll be an official Hell's Heart shirt. So that'll come
Yeah.
to you relatively soon. So back
Sweet.
to what we were saying as far as the band conversation is concerned. So you linked up with Earth Crisis, and
Yep.
I would say that Earth Crisis, I had mentioned this to somebody because we were having a discussion about veganism the other day, and I had mentioned it at the top of the hour. I think you guys were hugely influential, not just on veganism within the hardcore scene, but veganism in general. Because honestly, one of the first things I think of whenever thinking about veganism is Earth Crisis. It almost comes like naturally to me to kind of, equate the two. And so, did you ever receive any sort of major pushback for pushing an animal rights or an animal liberation message? Did you ever have any experiences where just people weren't having it? I think I heard a story about Ink and Dagger throwing meat on you guys or something like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I honestly, I don't think it was so much. I mean, yeah, so certainly, like, veganism and animal rights wasn't a very mainstream thing, like within the punk and hardcore scene initially. It became that, but it wasn't for a while. So I think some of the pushback was just because of the fact that we were vegan. But I honestly think that, like, that Ink and Dagger thing, and like other stuff that happened, I think it was more so not not related to the fact that we cared about animals, but more people were people felt threatened because of the way that we promoted our message. Like we were pretty like militant and like forward about it, and we weren't like people thought, there was rumors that we like beat people up that weren't straight edge or vegan, which never happened. Like that was we never attacked anybody for that. But we were very outspoken in all of our politics, whether it be like animal rights, human rights, environmentalism, straight edge, whatever. So I think it was like people had a problem more with our delivery rather than like the substance necessarily. And then I think a lot of what happened too, it became cool to not like Earth Crisis. There's been like waves of straight edge, right? So it was like the initial thing, Minor Threat, and then it was like the New York bands with like Use It Today, and then kind of the next wave was us. And I think when a lot of those people that were straight edge like sold out, it became cool to not like Earth Crisis. And we still had a lot of people that were coming to our shows having a good time, like appreciating our message. But I think there was a faction within hardcore that was like, it's probably kind of a jealousy thing, honestly. Like we were doing very well. We were getting bigger. We were even getting not really like mainstream notoriety, but we were breaking out of the hardcore scene a little bit. I think people had a problem with that. So I think it was more, like the delivery of our message people had a problem with, and also like a jealousy thing, and like it's cool to not like Earth Crisis, so we're gonna like try to fuck with them. So I think that was really a lot of what it was, and I think that's what it was with the Ink and Dagger guy. I think he was just trying to fuck with us to make himself look cool. Like I don't know if he really had a problem with animal rights or straight edge or anything. I think he just wanted to fuck with us.
It's unfortunate, man, because it's like I've always seen hardcore as like a sounding box for ideas. And it's like if you don't like the
Yeah,
idea or you don't like the music, just don't listen to the band. Why try to be some
yeah,
sort of comedian or some sort of antagonist or just try to
yeah.
disrupt somebody's performance or somebody, even somebody
Right.
else that's there just as a spectator, just trying to have a good
Yeah,
time and listen to
yeah,
good jams.
and there's like lots of. It's funny that you say that because like there's videos of a lot of the stuff that happened, like that thing in New Jersey. Um, Actually, the very first show I ever played with Earth Crisis, like 2 weeks after I joined the band, was the More Than Music Festival in Dayton, Ohio. That show, a similar thing kind of happened. And I mean, there was countless times that it happened, but Carl would always say the same thing, like every time. He would be like, if you have a problem with our message, come up and talk to us after the show. We'd be more than happy to have like an intelligent discussion about it. Let us play our songs right now. Like people are having a good time. Let us play our songs, but have a discussion with us if you have a question about our politics. But that almost never happened. People just wanted to like start shit, and then whatever. That's punk rock, right? Like punk rock kids start shit. Cause trouble, try to poke fun at people. Like it's all part of it. Like back then I was pissed off, but looking back on it now, it's kind of like, we were up on stage. We're in the spotlight. We're gonna get people pushing back on us. So now it doesn't really bother me. Like in hindsight.
Yeah. I've always kind of equated hardcore to being like almost like the older brother of punk rock in that punk rock is all about anarchy and chaos and destruction, and hardcore is a little bit more evolved in that you could have like, and that's
Yeah.
very mature and very intelligent on Carl's part to say that, because I think a lot of people just don't want to have a discussion. And myself, I was
Hmm.
vegan for a long time. I'm currently vegetarian, but it just blows my mind at the animus of some people towards those that don't eat meat. And it's like, why would you be against something that doesn't really directly affect you? And these people are trying to just live cruelty free lives, and they're trying to
Hmm.
not kill animals. Why do you feel like you even have to sound off about that or anything? It just kind of blows my mind. Do you kind of feel that way too?
Well, yeah, and I think I have a good idea of why that typically is. I mean, it's not true in every instance, but I think the main reason for that is a sense of like guilt and shame on their part, so they feel like they have to lash out to defend themselves. Like if I get in an argument with somebody about like animal rights or veganism, it's not because I started it, almost 100% of the time. It's because, they usually try to make it seem stupid that I'm vegan and care about animals by saying something ignorant. And in reality, it's because they're probably thinking to themselves, like in the back of their minds, like, oh, this dude's probably right. And they probably feel shame or guilt about it. So they feel like they have to lash out to make themselves feel better. And I think also, I guess part of it too, and I'm just thinking of this as I'm saying it, being vegan and caring about animals is in direct opposition to what most people do and how most people were raised, right? People weren't raised to care about animals except for like pets, their dogs and cats, they weren't raised to care about the animals they eat. They've had to desensitize themselves in order to mentally deal with the fact that they eat dead animals, So when you challenge them and just you being vegetarian or vegan, when you just being vegetarian or vegan and being around them challenges that mindset and makes them think like, oh, this person's doing it, why are they doing it? Oh, maybe because animals suffer and maybe that's not cool, So I think it's just it's a defense mechanism, I think, in reality.
That is definitely a good way of looking at it, and I never really looked at it from that perspective. A lot of men are typically the ones that push back on it. I don't, because to be honest, I meet a lot more, women, vegan, and vegetarians, but I've almost said it's like a
Mm.
masculinity issue. Like they feel like they'll be less of a man if they don't eat meat because society and even the media for a long time was always equated men who ate meat as weak or inferior or something like that.
Mm.
Does that kind of sound like something that maybe checks out?
Yeah, I think that's probably true too. Dudes definitely feel like they got to be like, macho and tough or whatever. So they'll, and they feel like they have to eat meat to do that, But I mean, it's crazy. I mean, you see like, there's a bunch of vegan bodybuilders now that are, you know, stronger than most average
Exactly.
dudes, and they're,
Yeah.
like dudes with huge muscles are the most, stereotypically the most manly people out there, right? And a lot of them are vegan now. So yeah.
Right. Some of the world's most top performing athletes, boxers, runners, vegan. It's crazy to me that
Mhm.
nobody necessarily makes that connection.
Yeah. Yep.
Just odd. It's weird. Now, with Earth
Yep.
Crisis, you guys were like Victory's it band for, you know, quite some
Mhm.
time. I still think so, like it had I know Victory doesn't exist as a label anymore, but that's again one of the first bands I think of when I think Victory Records is Earth Crisis. And you guys put out a string of really successful albums on Victory. And then with Breed the
Mhm.
Killers, you guys went to Roadrunner, which how did that
Mhm.
whole connection come about? Was it they kind of bought you out of the contract or they offered you a better deal? And what was it kind of like being on that label? Because I remember at that time it was they were definitely doing the thing for a while where they were signing a lot of hardcore bands like Madball and
Yeah.
Biohazard and things like that. So
Yeah.
how did that whole
Yeah. VOD.
connection come to fruition? Yeah, VOD, that was another one too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was, so I guess, yeah, Gomorrah Season Ends came out. And that was, I think, technically our last record that we were obligated to do with Victory. And, you know, um, Tony, God love him, he's a very passionate guy, but he wasn't the easiest guy to be on his label. And so we
A
were
lot of people
definitely
say
like
this.
kind of looking to yeah, for sure. Um, we were looking to jump ship kind of for a while. And I think also, we saw Earth Crisis as, something more than just a hardcore band. You know, and part of it was selfish, like we wanted to get bigger, more popular, and whatever, and break into the metal scene. But a lot of it too was like, you know, we felt like we had an important message, and we wanted to like, we didn't want to just preach to the converted anymore. Like vegan straight edge was huge and hardcore, and we felt like we wanted to get that message to other people. So we wanted to, you know, get to kind of a more like metal level from hardcore, you know. So at the time we started working with like a bigger booking agent, and, you know, we got an attorney and like all this stuff, you know, we started doing like the more pro kind of thing. And at the time, actually our first chance to leave Victory was going to be with Oz Records. Ozzy Osbourne started a label and made us an offer, which we accepted. Like we were going to be on his label. His label, well, they ended up folding, but they also ended up pulling the offer from us because it's a long story. But Ozzy was at a show of ours in LA. There was a giant fight that broke out. We ended up like like on our knees with our hands locked behind our heads with like the cops with their guns on us and stuff. So and it was like in front of a lot of people that happened. So I think, you know, that was probably one of the reasons that they pulled the offer from us. They didn't think we were going to be a match for the label. And then thank God, because the label folded anyways. But that kind of gave us a taste. Like we wanted to be off of Victory at that point. And so we also hired a manager at that time, Scott Koenig from Rush Artist Management, who's passed away since then, which sucks. But he was trying to bring us to some labels. So we got offers from a few different labels at the time. I remember Earache was one of the main ones. And we really wanted to be on Roadrunner though. Like we felt that was a good fit for us. Like Machine Head was on that label, Fear Factory, Madball. You know, I don't remember if VOD was on the label before or after us. I can't remember, but Biohazard was on the label. It just seemed like a really good fit. And they were also, I think, a bigger label than Earache. Yeah. So we wanted to be on Roadrunner. We definitely like pursued that. But they weren't really coming to the table with anything. And then I'll never forget, I was in New York City. My girlfriend at the time lived in Jersey City. So I was visiting her, and I got a call from our booking agent, this guy, John Finberg. And he asked, I can't remember exactly what the conversation was, but something about like, you know, what's going on with the label? Are you going to side to Roadrunner? And I was like, oh, they're not bringing anything to the table. I don't think they want us. He like hung up the phone, called me back, and was like, go meet with Scott Koenig right now. So I like took a train into the city and met with Scott Koenig, and it turned out that Roadrunner was coming to the table. Somehow they like pushed it and made it happen. And then shortly thereafter, we actually met with Roadrunner and signed a deal with them. And that's really the label we wanted to be on at that point. So we were super pumped that it worked out. It ended up not being the greatest thing for us in the end. They Breed the Killers, we recorded it. They definitely wanted to have a little more input into the direction of the record. They were like coming to the studio. We kind of ignored them. We weren't taking any of their advice at all. We're like, we're going to do it our way. And I think when we did that, like before the record even came out, they knew that we weren't going to follow any of their advice. So they were kind of like, and they kind of like backed away from the band a little bit. They still put out the record, but they could just tell we weren't kind of playing ball with how they wanted us to do stuff. And I think they like basically dropped us before the record even came out almost, you know, like they just were not interested in promoting that record. Yeah.
Wow. I didn't know that you guys were, I was like, well, they only did one album, and I kind of figured that was the case, that you guys were probably dropped, but I didn't know it was actually really before the album was released. That's crazy.
I mean, it didn't happen before the record came out. It officially happened shortly thereafter, but I think they knew before the record came out, just based on how we were towards them. Like, and you know, we were young. We didn't know like how we were supposed to do stuff. You know, we were just like, you know, we're Earth Crisis. We're going to do shit the way we want it, and we're not going to listen to any input from anybody else. You know, and not that I don't think they necessarily wanted us to like change our sound or anything. I think they wanted us to maybe do things a little bit differently. maybe to make the songs a little more approachable or whatever. I don't really know, but I think they could just tell that we weren't going to really take any of their advice. So I think even before the record came out, they sort of knew they weren't going to push it. So they barely did. I mean, they didn't really put, I mean, back then it was like ads in magazines and things like that, radio stuff, and they didn't really do any of that. And then the record came out, we were out on the road, and it was probably 2 or 3 months after the record came out. I think then we officially knew they were dropping us.
Wow. It's terrible. And, to mention back to what you were saying about Ozzy Osbourne, you guys got to play an Ozfest one year, which was
Mm-hmm.
huge for any sort of hardcore band, huge for any band in general. What was your
Yeah.
experience like playing Ozfest? And, you said you'd met with Ozzy. What's he like? Because, Black Sabbath is doing their last show ever.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm jealous because I never got to see any incarnation of Black Sabbath or even Ozzy Osbourne. And so I'm
Yeah.
really like, man, I wish I could be there. It's in England, but what was the experience
Yeah.
like playing
Yeah.
Ozfest, and what is Ozzy like as a person? Is he kind of like his on camera, on stage persona?
Yeah, I mean, kinda. I mean, he so uh when we played that Ozfest, it wasn't a tour yet. It was just 3 shows. And I don't even remember now like which Ozfest show we played. I think it was like in Arizona or Southern California. I forget. But that was before it was a tour. It was 3 or 4 shows, and a lot of it I think was like we played the second stage, and I think a lot of the second stage bands were brought to Ozfest because they were bands that Ozzy wanted to sign. Or, I mean, probably more Sharon Osbourne, really. She was probably the one kind of running the business stuff. So we played that show, and it was, I mean, that was like the biggest thing we had done up to that point for sure. I mean, playing Ozfest was like huge for us. And I don't think, I mean, I remember meeting the guys from Biohazard. They were a main stage band at that show. I think we were like on their bus hanging out with them. It was like it was a huge deal for us. I think Fear Factory played. I remember seeing Neurosis at that show.
Yeah.
It was cool, and so it was an incredible experience for us. Like definitely the most pro thing that we had done up to that point, like the biggest deal. And then shortly thereafter, they made an offer for us to be on the label, and they also offered us to be on the first full U.S. Ozfest tour. But just happened to be at the same time that Carl was due to have his first child.
Oh.
So like, and I mean, he's a good dad, right? So he didn't want to be gone for the birth of his first child, right? So he's like,
I
we
don't
can't
blame
do it. So we passed up like a giant opportunity, obviously, to not do that tour. And then it was funny because I think his baby ended up being born after the tour would have been over. So
Oh
I think because the baby was
no.
late. I think that's how it went down. But like we got it. Like we won't want to be
Yeah.
away for the birth of our kids either. So
Right.
but they offered us to be on the label. Sharon like flew out to New York and like took us out to dinner. She was very like motherly towards us. It was really cool. And then when we went through LA, Ozzy came to the show and like hung out with us backstage. And he was very like, he was kind of a lot like he is on stage and, on the show, kind of like hard to understand a little bit, seemed a little out of it. Very, very friendly and cool. Like I remember the big thing that he said to us, like he knew we're a straight edge band. And he was like, said something to the effect like that he was basically straight edge now because he had to be kind of for his health. And that he literally like could not remember like the best 10 or dozen years of his life because he was so inebriated during those years. So he like understood why we did what we did. So that was kind of cool. We connected with him on that level. So it was pretty cool.
Wow. That's incredible. Yeah, I think I definitely would have tried to be there had I had children. Would have definitely kind of passed up the tour. But yeah, that's crazy how that works out with, it didn't end up happening. But I think everything kind of happens for a reason. And with you
Yeah.
guys doing, you did Breed the Killers, and then you went back to Victory for Slither, which
Mhm.
I happen to really like that album. I know that a lot of people within the hardcore scene kind of have mixed feelings on that album, but I think it's incredible. I think it's got really awesome production. I think some of the songs on that are absolutely amazing. And I know you guys actually still play some of those songs sometimes, but like
Mhm.
you guys
Yeah.
definitely went in a different direction as far as stylistically, where it was they equated it to Machine Head almost at the time, and I could kind of
Mhm.
see that, and like, was that a
Yeah.
conscious decision, or was that something that you guys kind of just it was a natural thing, like that's what the output of Earth Crisis was at that time?
I mean, we were definitely listening to a lot of Machine Head at that time. Like that Burning Red, that record I think had come out maybe not that long before that, and we all loved that record. Um, and we had the singer from Machine Head on Breed the Killers on the one song on Breed the Killers. So they definitely were an influence for us. And honestly, like that record would have been sort of the record that Roadrunner probably wanted us to do at that time. When we did Breed the Killers, but we weren't ready. Like we weren't ready to write those songs at that point. But it's funny, like now, like that you say, like that you like Slither. I think at the time, yeah, people were like, "Oh, it's new metal. They're trying to like rap on it and whatever." Um, I mean, it's funny because Carl, like, you listen to All Out War, and Carl kind of rapped on All Out War. And that was from like whatever
Yeah,
1991 or 92 or whenever that came out.
yeah,
Um, so that's kind of like, and I've been, again, that's hip hop's the first kind of music I ever even got into. So it was definitely in us. But we were definitely trying to like every Earth Crisis record, honestly, we tried to push the limits and do something different and not record the same record as we did before. So I think Slither was kind of just a natural progression of that. And it's funny because now, like, a lot of people say what you said. A lot of people are like, "Oh, Slither is like my favorite Earth Crisis record." Back then, people weren't saying it, but like now, I feel like a lot of people do say that. I like those songs. It is a good record.
yeah. No, I always liked it. I thought it was great, because
Yeah.
I really kind of started discovering your guys' catalog probably around the later end of the 90s, so it would have been around the time of,
Mm-hmm.
Breed the Killers and, Gomorrah's Season Ends. And I remember that was like a big deal. Like Victory was really pushing that album, and I was like, "Oh, new Earth
Mm-hmm.
Crisis album, let's hear it." And yeah, it was really sonically different from everything that you'd had in your back catalog, but I liked it because
Yeah.
kind of at the time I was listening to like equal parts of hardcore and I guess you could quote unquote say new metal. And I don't really like that term because I think there's a lot of bands that fall into that banner, but it almost seems like a dirty word. Like there's a lot of really good
Yeah.
quote unquote new metal bands. You could just call them metal, you can
Mm-hmm.
just call them rock or whatever. But I guess there were certain
Right.
characteristics to that. So I always enjoyed that record. I thought it was great. There's some really like banging
Yeah.
songs on there, and it still sounds amazing even by today's like recording standards. So yeah, fuck those kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Exactly. And with Earth Crisis, I talked to Carl about the Geraldo interview. This may be kind of a question out of like left field, but like, did you guys ever experience any trouble with law enforcement because of your affiliation with Straight Edge? Like, were you ever like a target, I guess you could say?
Uh, no, not because of straight edge for sure. I mean, it's certainly possible. Um, I mean, it nothing ever happened to us, but I wouldn't be surprised if we were more for the animal rights stuff. Um, we had pretty explicit lyrics about militant environmentalism and animal rights, and
Right.
you know, uh, during the late 90s, there was a lot of like ALF and ELF actions
Left.
happening. So I wouldn't be surprised if if there was a kind of a file on us or something, from those times. But like we never had like law enforcement approach us or anything like that. But there were some like big actions in Syracuse at the time. Like I remember there was like a meat packing plant. There's a bunch of trucks like blown up or lit on fire. Like definitely like some serious stuff happened in Syracuse at that time. And like a lot of the people that did that kind of stuff, and some of whom got caught for some of those things, probably may have come out that they were inspired by, our music. So I wouldn't be
Right.
surprised if, we were on like the radar of law enforcement, but never had any kind of issues.
That's good. That's really good, actually. Now you were in the early incarnations of FREYA, and FREYA
hmm
was definitely a more melodic and different direction than Earth Crisis. And
hmm
you were only on like a handful of records. Why did you end up departing?
When I was in Freya, now I'm trying to remember actually who played drums in Freya right before me. It might have been Corey. And I don't really know why Corey stopped playing in Freya, to be honest. Um, but um, but yeah, I mean, basically they needed a drummer, and I was an easy replacement because I knew all those guys. But I was at that time I was already living in Buffalo, so like rehearsal was hard, songwriting was hard because it was kind of before you could just like, I mean, I guess you could maybe back then, we didn't know how to do it, but people weren't really like writing songs, like guitarists weren't like putting guitar tracks to like a drum machine back then, and then sending, emailing files to people to learn the song. That wasn't really like a thing back then. So it was like, unless we were in the same room, we weren't writing songs together. We just wrote that one record. The only record I was on, we wrote when I was in the band. And I only played in the band for probably 12 or 18 months. I think it was a very short amount of time. Never did like a tour really. I just played a bunch of shows here and there. It was just hard to like incorporate it into my life, traveling to Syracuse for rehearsal and playing shows, and while I have like a regular job and was living a few hours away and trying to start a family and all that kind of stuff. So it wasn't really possible for me to do it.
Wasn't conducive for life. Get it? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Um, w- uh, okay, so what are some of your favorite places to play in the world?
Oh, I mean, like in the U.S., Philly's always great. Syracuse, of course, is a great place to play. LA is awesome. Um, and Boston's great. I'd say those are my favorite places in the U.S. to play. But like, I love Eastern Europe. Like playing Czech is amazing. Like we always have great shows in Czech Republic. Um, Berlin is always a great show for us. That's always really fun. And I mean, we had a great time. We got to go to Southeast Asia a bunch of years ago. Uh, that was incredible. We'd never been there. Playing in Jakarta was a super cool experience. And I've told a few people about this recently. Like when we played in Jakarta, Jakarta's a primarily Muslim country, but more, at least back then, especially, it was like a more of a liberal Muslim country. So there was like women in like hijab, but with like heavy metal T-shirts like over the hijab. So it was like that was like some of the coolest shit I ever saw. And then of course we just got back from South America. We played in Sao Paulo and Santiago, and those shows were probably two of the best shows we played in a really long time. So I mean, we've been fortunate to play so many places, and a lot of those places have been really great.
That's excellent. Yeah, I hear Southeast Asia and South America have some really incredible hardcore scenes. I know the Philippines
Yeah.
has a huge one. I don't know much about Indonesia, but I know they definitely kind of set it off.
Mm.
And yeah, I spent some time in Japan. Their hardcore scene's amazing. It's almost like that spirit of
Yeah.
the 80s and the 90s and even early 2000s hardcore is still alive there. Like they're really just
Hmm.
super into all those bands, and a lot of people didn't really get the experience of seeing those bands when they were kind of in their prime, in their heyday, and so they're really grateful for the opportunity to experience any of those touring acts. So what
Hmm.
is your craziest tour story aside from the incident in LA with the police at the Ozfest show? What do you got for me?
Yeah. I mean, kind of I guess one of the crazier ones. Well, there's a lot, but I think one of our crazier ones. I just thought about it today when I was trying to think of what our craziest tour story would be. Was we were in Belgium, and um, we woke up at the venue. We were on a bus at that time, so we woke up at the venue. It was a beautiful day. It's like this beautiful little town. I can't remember what city it was, to be honest, but we just took a walk into town before the show to like enjoy the day. And it must have been a weekend. There was like, it was the style where you couldn't drive on the in the area. It was like the city center, right? So like there was no driving. There's people walking, like families with children, and like just a nice day. And these three guys were walking towards us, one of whom was on a bike, and our bass player Ian was like doing this, just snapping his fingers and hitting his hands together, just like whatever, like la di da, walking down the street. And I think the dude on the bike, who I think was drunk, thought Ian was like trying to be tough or start shit. So he started talking shit to us and was like looking over his shoulder, riding his bike as he was doing it. And he like crashed into a planter and like flew over his handlebars when that happened. So we like started dying laughing. Like it was obviously hilarious. But he and his two friends walked back towards us and wanted to fight. And we're like, it's a beautiful day. There's families around. We don't want to start shit. But our one guitar player at the time, Chris, who we ended up kicking out not long after that, he just like started to fight with this dude. So all of a sudden, like punches are getting thrown. There's like a rumble in the middle of this like nice area with all these families around. People are probably like screaming and running. And somehow, I don't think the guy was with these three people, but some like bystander dude singled me out for some reason, like ripped me off like the out of the fight. I like spun around, and when he ripped me away from them, he like tore my shirt. So like just like the collar of my shirt and the one sleeve were attached, and the rest of the shirt was like hanging off. And he was a big dude and turned out to be a really good fighter, and he like worked me over. And I was like out of it. He probably punched me 10 times in the face, and I was completely out of it. And at this point, I remember being like on all fours on the ground, but the rest of the guys in my band remember I was like standing in a daze, and the guy started running towards me and did this like flying side kick. And Scott, our guitar player, was like, "Dennis, watch out!" And I was just standing there in a daze, and he like booted me in the face and broke my nose. And so my nose is smashed. I'm like covered in blood. My shirt's hanging off my body. And at that point, like the fight ends, everybody goes their separate ways. And we're walking back towards the club. It was me, Ian, Scott, and this kid, Chris. Carl wasn't there. And those guys just like, they didn't kind of realize what had happened to me initially. And where they were like all like riled up, talking about the fight. And then they looked at me like, "What the fuck happened to you?" Because I'm like bloody and like my shirt's hanging off. And we had to go to the hospital. Chris, I think, had a broken hand. I had a broken nose. And at that hospital, the dudes that we got in the fight with like showed up at the hospital and tried to like fight us again at the hospital. It was wild. Yeah, so that was a wild day. So I ended up having to play the rest of the tour with a busted nose, and our guitar player Chris couldn't even play, so he had to sit the rest of the tour out. I think it was towards the end. We only had a few shows left, but yeah, that was pretty wild.
Came to the hospital to try to fight you? Wouldn't that be like?
Yeah,
I mean, like, wouldn't there be like cops there to be like, "Hey, these guys like assaulted us," or they
I
just
think
were so
yeah,
brazen that they didn't even care?
I think cops like kept them away from us. Like we were at the hospital first,
Oh,
and then they walked in, and I think like security or something like kept them away from us. I think. Yeah, it was crazy.
dude. I don't know what it is about Belgium either, because they tried to fight me in Belgium. I was over there as a Hare Krishna monk, and I was in Brussels, and I went to a convenience store, and I was there. I got my little like bead bag with my japa in it, and I was just had my hand in
Yeah.
my bag. I walk in the store, start walking out, and I'm about a half a block down the road, and three guys come flying out of the store yelling French, and I was just like, "No français, no français, no français," and they were like, "You stole from us," and I was like, "No, I didn't," and they said, "What's in your bag?" And I pulled out my meditation beads, and they were like, "Oh, okay," and I was like,
Nice.
did you really think this guy in these like monk robes is gonna be like ripping you? I mean, I guess you could be, but I mean,
Yeah. Right.
I was like, no,
Yeah.
I didn't. I said, I swear I didn't. And they just it kind of diffused the whole situation. And I was like, so maybe there's just something in their water that makes them aggro,
I don't
or
know.
I don't know. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
maybe.
That's wild.
That'd be a good disguise though for a shoplifter dressed in like Christian
Yeah,
monk robes.
absolutely. You'd be stashing stuff in your robes for sure. Let's see here. Oh, well, it's funny that you should mention that. There's a movie called Angel. It's from the 80s. It's like a kind of like a psychological horror, like a thriller movie. It's a little bit cheesy, but this guy's like a serial killer, and he disguises himself as a Hare Krishna monk with like a shaved head and
Oh,
like
sweet.
orange robes and everything.
Dude,
Yeah.
that's
So
great.
yeah, yeah, I forgot about that. Okay. Now I'm an arts and media guy. I always got to ask everybody, what are you influenced by as far as arts and music and literature of the past, and what are you
Mhm.
kind of reading, watching, and listening to at present?
Um, I would say, I mean, as far as like film stuff, I really like the Coen brothers. So like I loved Fargo is like one of my favorite movies. I've loved almost every movie that they've done. Um, as far as I mean music, I mean of course there's, tons of like punk bands and stuff that, that I've been inspired by. We've talked about a lot of them, Judge and Nisa Today and, first Cro-Mags record and whatever. Um, I mean, authors, probably one of my favorite authors that I've read recently, like novelists. Well, not recently, but Octavia Butler. I don't know if you know her.
Parable of the
Um,
Sower. I have that book. Yeah.
yeah, Parable of the Sower. That's like one of my favorite books.
Yeah.
So I like Octavia Butler a lot, author wise. Um, so yeah. I mean that's some of the stuff I've been into over the years. Yeah, now like I finally tracked down a copy of do you know Rod Coronado? Do you know who he is?
The name sounds familiar, but
Like
I don't
uh,
think so.
he's like he's a famous animal rights activist that like sunk the whaling ships in Iceland many moons
Oh,
ago. He was part of the Sea Shepherds like early on, but there's
okay.
a book that came out that kind of told his story called Operation Bite Back. And it's just all about Rod Coronado's story. So I'm like reading that right now, along with do you know who Bill Ayers is?
No, I was about to ask you if you're a Daniel Quinn guy.
I'm not familiar with Daniel Quinn. Um,
Uh, the one that did Ishmael and Story of B.
oh, yeah, no, I've never read his stuff. Um,
Okay.
but I've been reading
Bob
a lot of
Ayers, no.
nonfiction, honestly. Yeah, Bill Ayers, but
Bill Ayers, sorry.
he's an activist. He was a member of the Weather Underground, during those days, and he's like an author. He's a college professor, but his latest book is pretty interesting, and it's called when I might screw up that title. When freedom is the question, abolition is the answer. and it's interesting because it's like he doesn't want you to just read it. Like the beginning of each chapter is like he wants you to reflect on what the chapter is going to be about and actually write before you read the chapter. So it's like he wants you to be very involved in it. And then I haven't started reading it yet, but do you know Carl just wrote a book or published a book?
Yeah, The Unraveling. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just got hit. I saw Carl did a book talk here in Buffalo. He and the other two authors. So I have that book, and that's going to be my next like nonfiction, or I'm sorry, fiction book that I'm going to read. So I'm looking forward
Nice.
to that. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he briefly touched upon it when he was on the show, but I'd definitely like to get a copy of it. It's a children's book, right?
It's like I think they say like a not like a teen, like what do they say? Not trying to think
Young adult?
how they describe that age group. Even like before young adult, like it's a fantasy novel, and I think it's gonna be 3 parts is the idea. But they call it like young something. I can't remember what it is, but it's like not quite a teenager, like preteen almost, like that kind of age
Okay,
group is sort of the target. Um,
that's cool.
but yeah, I went to his book talk in Buffalo, and it was great. Like it was actually I've never. I mean, obviously I've known Carl for a really long time, but it was very interesting to see him like in that light. Like it was inspiring. Like it was cool. And I think it seems like the book's going to be successful. So I hope that things work out well for it. But I'm looking forward to reading it.
Yeah, I was really happy to see him kind of on the road doing the book promotion and whatnot. I'm
Mm-hmm.
definitely going to read it too. I hope I can find a copy at Barnes and Noble, and if not, I'll get one on Amazon. Yeah, it's really inspiring
Oh
to me
yeah.
when people within the hardcore scene kind of go outside the bounds of the hardcore scene and definitely go into
Mm-hmm.
other artistic ventures and endeavors and stuff. And I love supporting stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
So anybody that's watching or listening, pick up a copy of The Unraveling by Carl, and yeah, do that. That would be awesome. Um, what's a day in the life for you like?
I mean, generally, I have a regular job, right? So I sell BMWs for a living, right? That's my day job that pays the bills. So, I work most days. I usually start the morning. I work out pretty much every day. So I start the morning with either, like resistance training or cycling, and and then go to work. And then if we're getting ready for a tour recording, I'll usually find time in the evening to rehearse. Um, so generally it's working out, work, and drumming. That's generally and hanging out with my wife and my kids. So
Yeah,
that's generally what a day in my life is. Trying to
and
fit in like mountain biking or snowboarding or something when I can too.
oh, nice. Yeah, I was gonna ask you this question too, as far as like challenges with the band. Scott, Ian, and Eric are actually down here in North Carolina, and you and Carl are still up there. Does
Mm-hmm.
that make it challenging to kind of coordinate shows? I know you guys probably don't play with the frequency that you used to, but how does that
Mm-hmm.
coordination process work out?
Generally, like as far as playing shows, I mean, we've been playing together for so long that we can lock back in together pretty easily, and we just all kind of like on our own time. Like we'll figure out what our set's going to be for the tour and rehearse those songs just on our own, and then usually we'll come together. We usually get to wherever the first show is of the tour, and we'll like find a rehearsal spot, run through the set a couple of times, make sure we got everything locked in, and we generally do because everybody's kind of done their homework ahead of time. So that's kind of how we get ready for a tour. And then as far as like writing, and we don't write a lot of new music anymore, but when we do, it's generally Scott's a very prolific writer, so generally he kind of um, uh, takes the responsibility for writing most of the music nowadays. So he'll kind of like structure songs and like come up with guitar stuff, write like a general outline for drum stuff too with his like drum machine stuff in his studio, um, and then just send it to all of us, and we'll make little tweaks here and there. And and then pick out which songs we like and want to record, and then do it.
Excellent. And with technology these days, it just makes that whole process so much easier to where you could just send it somewhere and just bounce ideas off each other and you don't even have to be in the same geographical location. I actually love that. I think it
Yeah,
it gives bands
totally.
and musicians that are not even in the same parts of the world the opportunity to collaborate and not even have to be in the same room
Hmm.
necessarily. So I bet that's very
Yeah,
advantageous.
yeah, yeah.
One question for you. What is one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
Uh, I guess the one piece of advice would be, don't be afraid to do the thing that you really want to do. Um, I almost did not join Earth Crisis when they asked me to do it, and it would have been life changing if I wouldn't have done it. Obviously, but when they asked me, I didn't say yes right away, and I actually thought about it for a few days and was almost not going to do it, for dumb reasons. But I was almost not going to do it, and I'm like, I would, and I knew in my heart that I wanted to, but I just felt like, if I do this, I'm not going to follow the path that I'm supposed to follow, which is like staying in school and like going to grad school and being like, some type of like real professional or whatever. So I almost didn't do it, and I'm so glad that I did. So I would just say, like, if your heart's telling you something and you really want to do it, just do it. Don't be afraid.
It's pretty commonplace as far as advice that older people give younger people. I think you miss out on a lot of opportunities when you doubt yourself and you maybe
Mm-hmm.
feel like there's an easier trajectory in life and you don't seize upon that. And then you might end up living your life in regret. If you don't mind me asking, what were the reasons that were kind of your initial hesitation for joining the band?
Well, when they asked me to join, it was literally like 2 weeks later. They were going to play that More Than Music Festival in Dayton, uh, and um, and they had, like, I think, a weekend of shows booked at that point. So I knew, like, and I think they had also said that they had a summer tour that they were working on. Yeah, no, yeah, they did. Right at that point when they first asked me, it was like, yeah, we're going to play these couple shows. We got a summer tour coming up, and I was like, wow, that's like a lot. It's a lot of stuff I'm going to join this band, and we're immediately going to do all this stuff. And so I think it just made me, like, nervous to jump into it and to make a commitment to something that was going to kind of pull me away from the track that I was on, which was, I was a college student at the time. I was a sophomore in college. I was, like, a good student and whatever, and had been, like, on this, like, career path kind of. And So I think I was nervous about, like, derailing that, right? And like pursuing a career in playing rock music. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I was nervous to jump into that and walk away from, more of like a career oriented path. But I'm like,
It's a valid
I can't
reason.
imagine doing anything else at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean you definitely made some incredible music and you've lived out your passions and you're doing what you're talented at doing and you're loving and that's really all
Hmm.
anyone could ask for, I think, right?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Do you want to shout out any individuals or any bands or is there any groups that you feel like deserve any upcoming recognition?
I mean, like, I feel like Buffalo is, like, killing it with hardcore right now. I grew up here, moved away for a while, obviously, while I did Earth Crisis and lived in Syracuse. But like, all of a sudden, over the past few years, there's been, like, some really great Buffalo hardcore bands that have come out. Exhibition is great. Spaced is great. Um, Violent Way is killing it. Selfish Act, Fatal Visions. there's like this whole like slew of Buffalo hardcore bands that are really good. So I'd say all those bands they're killing it.
Excellent. I'm always looking for new and upcoming acts too, because I'm significantly older and I'm a little bit out of the loop. So I'm always curious as to who's out there absolutely crushing it. I always love hearing new music.
Mhm.
So I'll definitely have to check some of those guys out. And aside from,
Yeah.
Earth Crisis, do you have any other projects or any creative endeavors that you're working on?
We just recorded now it's probably a year ago, but we recorded that new CINDERBLOCK record. And if I cut out, just let me know and I can switch to the mic on my computer. I think my headphones might be running out of battery or something.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, yeah. So tell me if I start cutting out. But
Sure.
but yeah, CINDERBLOCK is kind of the last thing that I did project wise. We've started to talk about maybe recording a couple of new Earth Crisis songs coming up. We probably won't do like an LP, but probably another EP coming up. But that's about it. Yeah, nothing much besides that.
Excellent. And Holy Mountain's been kind of handling all your stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah. Danny's awesome. Yeah, he's been doing a great
Yeah,
job for us with like our shirts, the last release that we did. Obviously that Integrity split that we just did came out. Yeah, he's
that's
doing
right.
an awesome job for us with all that stuff.
Yeah, Danny's a good dude. I definitely
Yeah.
supported Holy Mountain for quite some time. It's interesting, before you and I were on the show, I've mentioned this a few times on the show, but I was wearing one of Danny's shirts when I got hit by a car and they had to rip it up. And then Danny never reprinted that
Oh
shirt. I
shit.
was like, no, yeah,
Oh no, that sucks.
sucked. Yeah,
That
I was
sucks.
I was pissed about that. I didn't want to lose that shirt because I knew Danny didn't do multiple runs of the same design. So I was like, oh, so pissed off
Yeah.
about that. But well, Dennis, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I think
Yeah.
this has been a really incredible show. One more question. You're not related to, this is one of my favorite movies in ever. You're not related to Joseph Merrick, the Elephant Man, are you? I know that's probably a shot in the dark.
No, 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 but yeah, he is a famous Merrick, but no relation.
Okay. All right. I was just curious because I was trying
Yeah.
to, I was like, Merrick, where have I heard that name before? And in the movie they call
Yeah.
him John Merrick, but in real life his name is Joseph
Yeah.
Merrick. But anyway, random question.
Oh.
I had to throw that out
Yeah.
there. But yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I want to thank you again so much for coming on the show.
Yeah.
I've really appreciated this. And I want to thank everybody else that has been a part of the show. I think it's awesome. I really appreciate any support that this channel gets, and you can support this channel by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing, and clicking on that bell for notifications. And if you listen to us on Spotify or Apple Music, give us a follow, give us a listen. It'd be most excellent. And dude, I can't wait to be able to come see you guys. I'm going to be actually attending the show in Los Angeles in October. So I
Cool.
think it's going to be a really great time.
Cool.
And anybody, if you're in the
Yeah.
area or if you're anywhere where Earth Crisis is playing any of those shows, please go out there to support them, buy their merch from Holy Mountain, and listen to their music on whatever streaming platform, or buy whatever vinyl from whatever's available. Please do that. And everybody, I want to thank you guys so much. Namaste. Jobless. Be good. Thank you again, Dennis. I appreciate you.
Of course.
Hell's Horn, lights again!